Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to episode 01 of the Comic Art Festival podcast. In this prequel episode, we will introduce ourselves and the podcast and hear all about our contributors, Chris and Mike.
Hello and welcome to episode 01 of the Comic Art Festival podcast. My name's Ian.
And I'm Nikki.
And here we are.
Yes,
We're here. We're here.
It's
You're
us.
listening. Whoever's listening, hello and thank you for listening. These first two episodes, 01 and 02, are generally about what we are about.
Prequels.
Prequels, assistants, yes.
Yeah, I like that.
Prequels. So you understand who we are, what the podcast is going to be about, and in episode 02, what's great in Kendall, and the festival itself, what we're going on about all this time.
Yes.
So this is about us.
Which is a worry.
It is, yeah. So turn off now. No. So we are a couple.
We are.
You're
For my sins.
You're my girlfriend.
Oh, you're my boyfriend.
Exactly. So we get on each other's nerves and stuff.
Do we?
You know, no,
I
I'm
didn't
just trying
realise
to
that.
pretend that.
Oh, that we're normal?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're not normal. We both live in Kendal.
We do.
I'm from Lancaster, which is 20 minutes down the road. However, Nikki, you are from
Whipsnade. Which is in Bedfordshire.
Bedfordshire.
Yeah, Bedfordshire. Darling.
Basically, a Savener.
I'm a southerner.
Dirty Savener.
I'm a southerner being brought up here to the north.
Yes.
Can I stay?
For now.
Okay.
Until superstardom hits and I get all the flock of ladies around me.
Aww.
What?
Maybe I'd have a flock of men round me.
Maybe, but that's fine. As long as I've got my flock of ladies, I don't care. So my name's Ian. I'll go first, shall I?
Yes.
Or shall we put ladies first?
No, that's why you're going first.
Okay, thanks. My name's Ian. I'm nearly 40.
I love that pause.
Only because I can't remember how old I am.
You're 38.
That's it. At this time of recording, I'm 38. So, complete nerd. Always have been all my life. Started reading comics themselves with... Well, I remember going to a shop on holiday and there was a selection pack of 5 comics for like £2. I'm like, ooh, look at the size of them. They were American DC comics. Like, they're odd shape, they're odd size. And ooh, green who? And so I picked up this set and it was just a random selection of comics from DC. So I think there was a Flash, there was Justice League of America, possibly even Europe. So many Justice Leagues. Definitely Green Lantern, and I've never heard of most of these. Obviously Batman was in it and Superman was in a Justice League, but I've not heard of the other characters before. And that just opened my eyes up to like comics in general. From then I sort of searched and found that the UK has its own market of comics. So obviously 2000 AD, as I got a bit older, brilliant, constantly brilliant. But I also found that I think it was Fleetway did Batman, and they did a monthly comic of Batman as well, and they released stories obviously from the American side, which superb, and that really just brought me in to enjoying comics and geek culture in general.
Yeah.
Obviously, I followed it on with all the films that have come out since. Best comic film. We'll discuss that in a show at some point.
I think I was about to launch myself at the microphone.
We'll discuss that at a show in the future.
Yes, okay.
Other than that, I've got hobbies of board gaming and miniature wargaming. So I enjoy a bit of painting little men, playing Warhammer and Blood Bowl, and anything that comes across, and obviously video games, which is why we met as well, due to love of video games and me working in game.
Yes, that's it.
So that's me, just all around nerd. What about you? What about you, Nikki?
Well, back in the midst of time. No, I'm almost 40. Because I'm older than you.
Older than me?
I'm 39.
I'm a young stud.
No, stop now. I, on the other hand, didn't grow up anywhere near a town.
I was about to say I've not grown up, but anyway.
I grew up in a zoo, in Whipsnade. Yeah, insert pun
in
here.
In a cage.
In a cage. No, not in a cage. But it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a little village stuck in the 1950s. And I grew up there. So I didn't have access to comics. Though I do remember vaguely when I was about 8, I managed to get my hands on some random comic on holiday and just loved the art. I have no idea which comic it was. It was set in space, I know that.
Could I just jump in and say something? I completely forgot the Beano is where I really started.
Oh, I was a dandy. I was in the...
We forget about that. I'm thinking more the mature... Well, not mature, but...
Yes.
But yeah, really, Beano before any of that.
Yeah, no, I got the dandy every week delivered to the door.
So we did have...
I did have comics. Why do we not put that in with...
Because it is... Well, they are designed for children. They are children's comics, and they're brilliant at what they do. But I think you sort of forget the work required to create those comics is just as much as it is for a fantastical graphic novel or whatever you want to.
I was in Desperate Dan's Pie Club. I had a badge.
Yeah, but Beano was better, and hence why it's still around.
Don't say... No, the dandy is around. It's online now.
Okay.
But yes, I was always a little jealous that my brother got the Beano and I got the dandy, and he wouldn't let me borrow his.
Mean.
I know. When we got the annuals every Christmas, so when he'd finished reading his, we used to swap.
Wouldn't it be great to have kept all those?
I have.
Where?
I've got all my annuals. I've got all my dandy annuals.
No, I'm talking about the actual comics as well.
Oh, I haven't kept the comics.
No, that would be amazing.
I did for a while because I collected some of the art out of it. From like Billy Whiz and things like that. So I collect because I liked some of the styles. I mean, obviously Bash Street Kids was Beano, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
But I did like the style of artwork in that as well. So I used to cut them out and stick them in a scrapbook.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if I still got the scrapbooks because I used to also cut out the Garfield strips and put them in a scrapbook. And so that's where I kind of came in. But it was more the art for me. And then I started copying everything. And then obviously the cartoons on telly.
X-Men. And Spider-Man and the
so I used
Batman
to sit and draw them all the time. So X-Men I was thoroughly addicted to.
Insert theme music.
So kind of that's where I was into it. But you brought me into the board gaming area.
Well, yeah.
Because I didn't even realise that whole thing existed, really. I mean, I used to squish my nose up against Games Workshop. Or was it White Dwarf?
White Dwarf's magazine. Yeah. Games Workshop is the...
Did they have another name before they were Games Workshop?
No.
But I used to stick my face up against and look at all the pretty models, but there was never anyone in there. So I never dared to go in and have a look.
They're usually just full of
men with beards.
Men with beards. Like me.
So I never crossed the threshold as such.
I think the problem with comics, certainly where Lancaster was the same, there was, certainly as we were growing up, a struggle to get those American comics which you want as a teenager. You know, you don't. Yeah. You want that those superhero comics is what I wanted.
Yeah.
And there was a sort of struggle to get those. There was ways to do it, but without the internet, it was a lot harder than.
Well, you had to find one, then you could subscribe to it, your local thingy, and have it delivered in, if they could get hold of it.
If they could get hold of it. I mean, it's fine in the bigger cities where you had comic shops left, right, and centre.
Yeah, but even that, I never remember finding a comic shop when I was little.
We probably weren't looking for it, but they were always there in Manchester, London, you know,
you see,
bigger cities and so forth. But no, I mean, 2000 AD was brilliant, but it was a little bit more mature, required a bit more mature audience. It just never seemed to get those comics that I wanted. But now, obviously, with the age of the internet, they're available just like that.
Oh, you can get hold of anything now.
Yeah, and obviously with the films, it's just mass market appeal.
Yeah.
But one thing that sort of this past few years has taught me is the range of comics that are out there from the superhero range. You know, ignore the superhero range. There's so much more out there, and I think we're learning a lot as we're going along,
which is good.
Which is very good.
Take everyone along on a journey with us.
Well, it is going to be like that, and we'll talk. We're going to take a break in a minute, but we're going to talk about that afterwards, about the actual podcast and why we're here in a moment, what our intentions are. Before we do that, what is your favourite superhero?
My favourite superhero?
Or who is, I should say.
Who is my favourite superhero?
No, I didn't give you that. I said comic character.
You did say comic character.
Okay, comic character.
Because I was like, well, what I've got is not a superhero. But thanks for throwing that
Go
one
on,
in.
Comic character.
Well, you see, even though I couldn't get to comics, I did have a very good independent bookstore when I was growing up, which did supply manga, which if I convinced my mum that it was a proper book, I could pick up some. So I actually .hack as well. That series, it's only 3 books long. It's very, very good. Obviously, there's...
Is that all it is?
The first...
I was going to say, because
but
there's
then they go on.
Stuff, aren't there?
Oh, yeah. And then it goes on. I mean, but you can get the 1 to 3 Twilight Saga one type thing. That one is very good, and I like Black Rose in it and Kite.
Okay.
Which are two characters in there, so that's my two favourites. And I like Jing, King of the Bandits, because I couldn't really decide between the two. And he's brilliant, and that's a much funnier comic.
You do like your manga?
I love manga.
Comics and so forth more than the American side?
I do, yeah. I definitely veer towards the manga, I'm afraid.
Sort of comic characters, I mean, there's so many for me, but there's two that really stand out. Obviously, Batman is an easy one. But he's just always been there as I've read comics. He's just the mainstay of...
He is your mentor.
He is. I am bang. And he is super. There's just a whole thing about him. I mean, the films as well, bar one. We don't discuss Batman and Robin.
What do you mean? I think that was done very, very well.
We don't discuss Batman and... I mean, you could even say Batman Forever. But Batman and Robin, we don't even look at that film. It doesn't exist. We'll call it Robin and Robin. But yeah, the whole story of Batman and the whole story of Bruce Wayne and the whole characters around it, just love.
They're very developed characters.
They are. The other one is, again, a bit obvious. It's Dredd and his universe as well. In a way, Batman and Dredd are similar in some ways because they are aggressive enforcers. Okay, Dredd kills, but he's doing it within his legal system. And Batman doesn't kill again. That's his choice. Otherwise, he'd be a murderer. So, brilliant. Dredd again is just so many characters, but so many individual stories within Dredd that don't link or do anything. They're just the one-off stories, and I think they're my favourites. Yeah, where you just have this story does this,
and it's start to finish,
and that's the brilliance of the latest film. Let's be honest, it's a single story.
It's awesome,
done, and it is such a brilliant film. Again, well, there was only ever one film made.
The thing was, as a kid and never having seen and having read the comics, that film was awesome. But for the diehards,
let's not even go there.
Now I know how much of a travesty it was.
So 2000 AD, every week Dredd being in it, and it just, again, from about 13, 14, I read it week in, week out. My mum bought me. She'd buy me a comic a week. Yeah, it used to be the Beano, then it moved on, and
you see, I went on to girly magazines. What a
even I read some
Wally.
of them. Hey, let's not go there. Right, so as part of the podcast, we're going to have two regular contributors to the show as well. We've got Chris.
Yes.
Who'll explain exactly why he's on the show in a minute, but I met him. He was my assistant manager when I worked at Game, which is also where we met Julie, the director of the festival. Lovely guy is Chris.
He is.
And he's going to talk all about his role within the festival each time. Then we've got Mike, who is a fellow wargamer and a complete comics nerd.
Yes.
So he's just going to talk random topics,
getting him in.
random topics every episode in regards to what he's been reading or is reading. That made no sense in English.
Didn't.
We'll just move on. So we're going to play two contributions from these guys now. They're going to tell you all about themselves, and we're going to come back and talk about what to expect from the podcast.
Diary of a Red Shirt. Diary of a Red Shirt. My name is Chris Metcalfe. I am 35 years old and I've lived in Kendal my entire life. I work at the Westmoreland Shopping Centre where I'm the assistant director of the whole place. My hobbies are playing video games largely, well, far too much, and watching films, preferably going to the cinema as often as I get a chance to. I have a wife and 3 children who are 18, 16 and newly 5, just the other day in fact. Before I worked at the shopping centre, I worked at Game, which is how I met Ian, and through that's how I met Nikki and her wonderful accent. We worked together for about 6.5 years, me and Ian, as he was the manager, I was the deputy manager at the Game store there. We had some good times, but it was always an enjoyable day at work. I think it wasn't. Well, when was it? I left shortly before Ian left at Game, which is when I went to work at the shopping centre, and then he moved southwards to bring Nikki back up north. And then once they returned, they asked me to get involved with the other podcast, House of Geek, for which I provide gaming reviews and general crap talking on a regular basis. I first got involved with the festival. Well, I first came to hear of the festival when at work one day, Julie came in. Julie was a frequent customer of mine and Ian's, and she's come in and we used to stand and talk about films for hours upon hours whilst not doing any work. But then one day she came in and said she'd been reading a lot of comics and she was thinking about starting a comic festival. And then Julie being Julie, within a week she organised the entire thing. I think it was about a week later she came back and she'd been in touch with Brian Talbot and said that he'd basically given her his address book of all these amazing comic artists, and she started getting in touch with them and she had the plan already sorted. Then a few months later she asked me to help look after and run the town hall segment, which is the comic clock tower, and be essentially like a house manager for that. Make sure everything goes okay, look after the events that are on there, and make sure that everyone was kept nice and happy in there. Since then my role's expanded slightly. I still do the town hall, but now I help curate who goes into the town hall as well, which is a fairly simple process of getting on all the applications that take a few months to come in, having a sit down, looking through them all with a few other people that we have on the curation panel, and then deciding what it is we want to sort of offer to the public come the end of the year. We'd like to have a decent mix of stuff we've not had before, things that are different, and not just go with the same people every year in, year out. And we like to keep it a mix of as many different styles as we can, keep a mix of decent amount of publishers to actual artists and writers, as well as offering sort of shop stalls that can sell comics on the day as well. But that's essentially my role, and also helping manage all the rest of the staff that we have in the town hall over the weekend, and setting up and closing down, which takes forever. Although less time in more recent years than it has done in the past, because we've got the hang of it now. I think the third year was probably our fastest setup yet. During my diary of a red shirt, I'll be talking about what my role is actually entailing currently, what's going on at the moment, and what we can expect in the coming months. Diary of a red shirt. Diary of a red shirt.
Mike's mutterings.
My name's Mike, and Ian and Nikki have kindly asked me to record a short slot for their new podcast, which is going to be the official podcast for the Lakes International Comic Art Festival. Really impressed I got the gig, and I'm really happy to be on board. I've never done anything like this before, and I hate the sound of my own voice, so I'm not quite sure why I was asked, but hopefully that's going to come clearer later on. They wanted me to talk about anything comic related that's either exciting me right now or in the past. Pretty much free reign, I think, but we'll find out shortly enough, because Ian's quite harsh with the editing, I've heard. For this intro show, I just wanted to cover a few things. I guess a bit about myself, how I got into comics in the first place, how I ended up in the Lakes, and how I got to be ruining Ian and Nikki's podcasts. I grew up in North Wales and was lucky enough to have an Uncle Peter. Now, my Uncle Peter, God bless his soul, he didn't have any of his own kids, and he had absolutely no idea what age-appropriate material was. And every Saturday, he'd come and visit with comics under his arm for my sister and myself, and Sharon would get a Bunty, or I can't remember the names of them now, but basically girls' comics at the time, and they would just be immediately resignated to the bin. And we'd just sit around and share my 2000 AD. I got it from about Prog 60, I think, and I think immediately I just kept them, didn't throw any away, and I think that was the first sign I knew anyway I was going to be a collector. Everyone needs an Uncle Peter in their life. Just started the ball rolling for me. There was Marvel stuff about, but 2000 AD in the late 70s and early 80s was just something so new and different, and I'd love to do an episode about how, like, Dredd, Johnny Alpha and Flesh in particular warped the minds of so many of me and my friends back then. Comics never grew old for me, and throughout teens, throughout uni and into my 20s, I just kept reading more and more. Got into different types, different genres, and really the whole universe of all the independent stuff that's out there. Stuff that isn't readily available unless you look for it. And again, I'm hoping to go into that a bit more in later shows. Still into Marvel, and I still like a bit of DC, but they really are only part of what's a much bigger comic verse for me. Back in 2012, we were living in Chester, and despite it being a student town, it wasn't exactly a geek utopia, put it that way. There was a couple of comic shops, but proper old school ones with just stuff in boxes piled high, and everything just thrown all over the place. And if the owner didn't know where it was lost forever. But being a proper geek, I was also into like computer gaming, tabletop gaming, RPGs, and Chester at the time was just about supporting that habit for me. But kind of out of the blue, really, we suddenly had to move for jobs, and within 8 weeks, we had to organise moving up to the lakes. Kendal was best placed for both of us, and that's how we ended up here, really. I'm going to talk a bit about Kendal more next episode, but for now, let's just say it was the best move we ever made, and you'll find out a bit more why. But principally, within months of moving, they started advertising the 2013 International Comic Arts Festival, and I really could not believe my luck that they decided to move a comic festival here to Kendal. It was like bringing the mountain to Mohammed for me. It really was. I think about the same time, I met Ian for about 10 minutes, and then he moved down south. Funnily enough, shortly after I kind of got into Twitter, and I suppose through friends of friends, I reconnected and kept in touch with both Ian and Nikki for ages, it seemed, before they finally moved back here to Kendal. And I guess that's how I got to do this. So it's not what you know, it really is who you know. Next week I'm going to be talking about Kendal and the festival and what it means to me, and hopefully give you a bit of an idea why it's not a comic convention, it's a festival. The whole town is involved. So I'm really looking forward to talking about that. I'll catch you then.
So why are we doing a podcast based on the Comic Art Festival, and why are we suitable candidates for this, I suppose we should say?
Tell me, Ian. Tell me why.
Well, you tell me.
No, you tell me.
Because you don't know the answer.
I do.
Me and Nikki have been doing a podcast for 2 years now.
Years and years.
Entitled House of Geek. You can find it at houseofgeek.org.uk. Essentially about just geek culture.
About us, really.
About us.
What we get up to.
Yeah, originally it was about board games. It sort of manoeuvred off that and just gone onto everything geek related.
We couldn't play enough board games to...
Couldn't also buy enough board games to review twice a week.
Yeah.
So we did that. The first year of the festival, I got involved with, whilst working at Game, helping promote the festival and giving prizes through the company and so forth. So that was my first link to the festival. Now, unfortunately, I only got to one event at that festival because I was too busy working, which was really annoying. But the whole town lit up, and as I say, we'll talk more about the festival itself in the next episode, where we're interviewing the director of the festival. And then I moved away for a little bit, and one of the main things when I said to Nikki we need to move back up to Kendal was this Comic Art Festival.
This is how you lured me north.
I lured you north with all these wonderful things. So up we came, and obviously I took you to the first, well, it was last year's 2016 festival. Yeah. And I think you were a bit, although we didn't see a massive amount of classes due to children being on tow, I think it hit a spark.
Oh, yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah. It certainly lit a spark in me as well, again, in regards to reading more comics, as I was saying, and different comics to what, I suppose, out of my comfort zone is a way to look at it.
Well, yes, you've been reading some other ones, haven't we? You've been reading. You learnt to read for this.
I know. I look at the pictures. So we then put it to Julie, the director, that we have a go at this and create a podcast for the festival. And it was quite nerve-wracking, actually.
It was, putting together a...
Because we did a basic episode of similar to what we've done now.
Yeah.
And well, actually, before that, we did a review or a discussion on the
that's
festival
yes.
itself
Yeah.
for the House of Geek show, which you can hear as well. So if you want to hear what our thoughts on last year's show.
Yes. Can you
Before
remember
we're
which
involved.
episode it is?
No idea. 30-something. Go listen. But we seem to get a lot of positive feedback from people involved within the festival
Yes.
for that. So we put forward to Julian. And it took about a week for it to come back. It
I
wasn't
know,
a
it was-
yes.
yeah.
It was like, are we good enough?
Yeah.
Will this
Has
work?
she listened to us?
Actually interesting. But no, it was, really up for it. So here we are creating this podcast. It's going to be a monthly format.
Yes.
Basically because the time it's going to take to get this together,
Yes.
we're trying to get a real good content for this. So
We're trying to get a lot of interviews. And things like that. So it's fitting in with other people's plans.
So we thought we'd do it monthly. And obviously it'll lead up to the festival itself, and within that lead up time we will be interviewing people who are more than likely going to be involved that year.
Yep.
So already we've interviewed Charlie Adlard, Emma Vicelli,
Yes.
Pete Taylor,
Yep.
and we've got Sean Phillips and John Freeman due as well.
Lined up.
These are big names. These are
huge names. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, me and Charlie bonded.
Yes, okay.
Which I'm very pleased with. Bonded in our teasing of you, in fact.
Yes.
So that was lovely.
I'm sure that's going to happen in many episodes. So, each episode we're going to be interviewing at least 2 guests.
Yes.
They're not necessarily always going to be huge names. They may well be the smaller artists doing the smaller comics. We want a mix of people who are going to be involved with the event. We're also going to have our contributors on there. Now, there may be random contributors coming up at some point. I don't know. We'll see what happens and see how it goes.
Yeah, it's an ever-evolving beastie.
It is. I'm not sure what's going to happen there. We will also try and give our thoughts on a couple of books each episode. We're also going to discuss the movies and the films around them, let's be honest. So all the big Hollywood blockbusters, Ghibli films, the animated films of your superheroes and so forth. Essentially anything we watch that's related we'll be discussing as well. And then we'll also just look at what's coming up within the festival, because obviously we want to... This podcast isn't about advertising the festival.
No.
But we do want to tell you how good it is and it's worth coming and seeing.
Yes, yeah. We're giving you that backdoor look into the festival of the people and the...
Go on. No, you've lost your words. Now she's giggling to herself. Although we are officially affiliated with the festival, we have got no agenda to be positive if we don't feel we have to be.
Ooh.
So every bit...
we're dangerous.
Well, no, the point I want to make is that the enthusiasm and the positivity that's coming out of us isn't because we're getting paid or anything. We're getting nothing.
Nothing.
This is all voluntary.
This is out of love.
And this is all honesty. So please don't listen to our shows thinking, oh, they're just doing that because they have to.
Yeah.
Any enthusiasm that's coming out or any positivity is purely because that's exactly how we feel. And if there's something we don't enjoy, we tell you. However, I have a feeling there'll be never any point of that.
I don't.
And that's why I'm saying this, because I can be honest about that, and I want people to understand that the whole thing, it's us being honest about what we're seeing, reading, hearing, and that's what we plan to do with the show.
Yes.
So we want listener contribution as well.
Please, that'd be nice.
Now, unfortunately, we can't tell you each episode who we're going to be interviewing, so you can feedback, because unfortunately, generally, we're going to have done the interviews.
Yes,
we're sort of rolling way in advance of what we're doing.
Yeah.
So there's multiple ways you can contact us, and if you check these feeds out, we will put up when we're going to be interviewing people, so you can ask questions of these particular artists if you want to. So you can find us, the website for it is comicartpodcast.uk. Under that you will find all the links what I'm going to talk about now to our social media and so forth. On Twitter we are at Comic Art Fest Pod. Annoyingly, all the good names have been taken.
It's such a mouthful, that one.
I wanted Comic Art Podcast, no. Comic Art Pod, no. So we're Comic Art Fest Pod. On Facebook we are facebook.com Comic Art Podcast. Nice and simple.
That's
so follow either of them, and we will put up when we're going to be interviewing people, and if you want to ask questions, we will try our best then to include them within the interviews, dependent on time and what that person's talked about.
Yeah.
If there's anything you want to hear, any books you may want us to have a look at and read.
Oh yes, pointers, directions.
Anything you'd like to see us featured, we are more than happy to listen and take notes. Obviously, the podcast itself will be available on iTunes and any general podcasting device that you have.
Even the toaster.
Even the toaster.
It'll be fine.
Could I also ask you to have a look at Nikki's artwork as well? Because she's done some drawing at nikkidraws.uk. And obviously, the festival itself, if you're interested at all throughout any of this, comicartfestival.com. The website there, it's got all the information about the previous years, and coming probably by the time this is released, the list of names for this 2017 festival. So I think that's it.
Is that it?
The next episode 02, as I say, will be about Kendall itself and an interview with the director, Julie Tate. Then episode 1, which will be out at the same time as this, we interview Pete Taylor and Charlie Adlard.
And Charlie, my best friend.
The Walking Dead.
He doesn't know he's my best friend now, but
he will when he hears this. So thank you very much for listening, and we hope you listen again.
Yes.
Fingers crossed.
Come back.
Yes.
Please. Thank you for listening. Find out more about the festival at comicartfestival.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter at comicartfestpod, and have a listen to our other show at houseofgeek.org.uk.